Hey, everybody. This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good looking friends. This is part 3 of this mini series that I've been putting together. If you have not checked out the other 2 that lays the foundation and then also explaining Prince Harry's involvement with this censorship industrial complex, I highly recommend you go ahead and check it out. I have put together playlists and you can see it in the description below. So, picking back up to where we last left off, I had mentioned that Prince Harry's involvement with the Aspen Institute and his contribution to that misinformation, disinformation report has influenced or become part of US government policy discussions. And being that the taxpayer had paid money to the organization, in theory, Prince Harry was an actor of the state. Combine that with the scandal of Twitter suppressing conservative American speech in collaboration with our federal agencies. So, in essence, our government was weaponized to attack Americans for expressing views that didn't align with their liberal leftist agendas. We can safely say that this was also going on at Facebook as well as YouTube. And being that Prince Harry and Meghan had acknowledged their involvement with influential people and policymakers from the private sector, I think it's safe to say that his access to various people in our government, the CIA with Renee DiResta, access to the FBI, and even CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. And considering what we know about those coordinated attacks against certain individuals who spoke out about his wife, there's a good possibility he had access to people's information. Again, I bring up the burning question is how did Harry know about January 6th? Why has nobody questioned him about that from our government? Let's go back to November 2019 when Hillary Clinton visited Meghan at Frogmore. So, Meghan used her newfound status to secretly invite the former Secretary of State to Frogmore Cottage. Note the word secretly. So, no one really knows what they talked about, but I can't imagine or see Hillary Clinton wasting her time unless there was something in it for her or the Democrat Party. What I find really weird about this is at the time, Meghan was still a working royal, as well as nobody knew about Megxit, because this was before Megxit. So even if Meghan had a visitor come to her house and it be Hillary Clinton, don't you think the royal family would have put a stop to that, considering it is of political nature? This would sort of be like Catherine inviting Elizabeth Truss to her home. I truly believe that Meghan and Harry knew exactly what they were doing before January 2020 in announcing Megxit. They knew what their purpose was going to be in the United States with our government pertaining to the upcoming election. Soon after Megxit, Meghan and Harry go again secretly to Stanford. At the time, nobody knew what they were doing there. Let's not forget that Renee DiResta is a researcher at Stanford. You may be asking yourself, but how can you be so sure of that? Well, you know, the Harkles, they love to put out puff pieces and, it's now coming back to bite them. So back in August of 2020, Prince Harry wrote this article himself. So he can't come back and say, oh, my words have been twisted. Here it is in black and white. In this article, he gives us a time frame as to when he was doing this work. So in or about around June, he was calling heads of corporations and chief marketing officers to tell them that the digital landscape was not well and that online platforms have contributed to it. We're stoking hate and health crisis and a crisis of truth. But then he says here at the bottom, we did this at the time as the launch of a civil rights and racial justice campaign called Stop Hate for Profit, which sought to change online policies around hate speech. Okay? Change online policies, government policies And to note that Stop Hate for Profit was a campaign that was started and promoted by Democrat females such as Elizabeth Warren, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton. But then you find out further in this article what they were actually doing at Stanford University. So he's saying that they spoke to researchers in studying how social media affects people. And then at the bottom here it says, Megan and I heard similar arguments made by human tech leaders with whom we convened at Stanford University earlier this year by internet law experts, by neuroscience, and others. And the closer for the intention of this article, he says right here, we've spoken with leaders across the racial justice movement. We need meaningful digital reform. And while the role of policymakers and regulators is important, we can't just wait for them to take the next steps. Let's remember that Hillary Clinton was so pissed off that it took her 4 years to get over the fact that she lost the election. And the whole time she kept blaming technology, blaming the fact that social media was manipulated by all these bots. And the reality is that the Democrats were determined to control the situation in their favor. And so they leveraged the power of influence with all these celebrities. Of these celebrities at the time were Harry and Meghan. So these two knew what they were going to do before they got here. And a lot of the time, this publicity that they were receiving was under the guidance of Sunshine Sachs, who, let me remind you, Ken Sunshine is best friends with Hillary Clinton. So now let's get back to former CIA head researcher at Stanford University, technical advisor on the Aspen Institute Commission for Disinformation, and at Prince Harry and Meghan's disposal, Renee DiResta. Here is something you should know about her. A secret effort to influence the 2017 Senate election in Alabama used tactics inspired by Russian disinformation teams, including the creation of fake accounts to deliver misleading messages on Facebook to hundreds of thousands of voters to help elect Democrat Doug Jones in the deeply red state, according to a document obtained by the Washington Post. What is known about Project Birmingham is that its effort was a digital messaging operation to influence the outcome of the Alabama Senate race by targeting 650,000 likely voters with messages on social media platforms such as Facebook, while obscuring the fact that the messages were coming from an effort backing Jones. So according to Fox News, they say that Democratic operatives backed by a liberal billionaire and facilitated by a former Obama official created thousands of fake Russian accounts to give an impression the Russian government was supporting Alabama Republican Roy Moore in last year's election against now Senator Doug Jones. The two main things that you need to understand here is that, one, this was swept under the rug, and two, Renee DiResta was part of this group for a few months when this plan was concocted. Renee DiResta was advising AET, offering technical guidance and helping them meet potential supporters in the months before Hoffman agreed to actually fund the company. And then DiResta actually accepted a single share in AET and a seat on its board. So she had involvement with this company and obviously was in the know of things going on. Now, Renee had said that she had left that company after a few months and ended up distancing herself from the group. So I put this up here because it's worth mentioning. I don't know if there's any connection to it, but being that this couple is connected to all these dodgy people in the Democratic Party, this wouldn't surprise me if there is some link. What concerns me the most is the amount of effort that Renee is putting into breaking down and getting our privacy rights taken away, so the government can spy on us more. Here's what Michael Schellenberger said about an idea that's being tested at this moment.
In our research, she kept coming up as really the smartest person in the room. She was always the person who was the first to sort of to create justifications for censorship. Her story itself always struck me as kind of fake. She sort of suggested that she was fighting anti-vaxxers online in 2014, but the next thing you know, she's advising the Obama White House on how to fight ISIS. It then came out accidentally because her supervisor at Stanford is sort of slightly clumsier, maybe not as bright as she is. He accidentally revealed that she had been a CIA fellow.
So who are we in the observatory right now? There's me. There's Elena Christ. Elena, you want to wave? I'm really happy to announce for the first time that Renee DiResta will be joining us as our research manager. Renee, you can wave. Renee, yeah, let's give her a hand. Yes. You may know Renee from such reports as the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence's report on Russian interference. Renee has done a lot of writing and analytics. She has a computer science background like me. She is part of the academic unwashed with a computer science degree from a public university, but has gone out and worked for the CIA.
So I think she's maybe the most important person on the outside of the censorship industrial complex making the case for greater censorship. They just published an article, just true to form, in Foreign Policy, Renee did with her colleague, called How Gamers Eclipsed Spies as an Intelligence Threat. So now Renee DiResta is out there making the case for expanded censorship and expanded surveillance of gamer chat rooms.
Well, Michael, they're already doing it. So when Aspen Institute delivered their report, they had a competition going and they were awarded money, American taxpayer money, of course. And the grand prize was $75,000 that went to a company called Altaria Inc. So they have created a media literacy game for middle and high school students. It's a spy-themed video game that teaches students to neutralize misinformation. If I were parents, I would be deathly afraid that these people are targeting your children and collecting a whole bunch of data about them. And when you start putting these pieces together, you finally get a picture of what's really going on.
Prior to January the 6th, where I warned him that his platform was allowing a coup to be staged. That email was sent the day before, and then it happened, and I haven't heard from him since.
On the morning of January 6th, I sent Twitter lawyers a message warning them that our team was hamstrung by leadership.
It has been reported that more than 40 FBI personnel, agents, or contractors were in the crowd on January 6th. Is that number accurate?
I don't know if that number is accurate.
Former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sun reportedly has asserted that the protest crowd was filled with federal agents. Did you have any assets present that day in the crowd?
When it comes to what you're calling assets, or what we would call confidential human sources, that's a place where, again, I want to be careful, much as I said in response to an earlier question. There are court filings that I think speak to this that I'm happy to make sure we get to you, assuming they're not under seal. And that can better answer the question than I can as I sit here right now.
Director Wray, in light of information provided to us about the FBI's investigation of the January 6th pipe bombs, in an interview with Assistant Director Stephen D'Antuono, Chairman Jordan and I sent you a letter a month ago. Some of the information that we found in that interview was that phone data that could have helped to identify the pipe bomber was corrupted, was unusable. He also wasn't sure who found or how the second bomb was found at the DNC. Do you know how the second bomb was found at the DNC? And when do you plan on answering our letter?
Well, as to the letter, I will work with the department to make sure we can figure out what information we can provide. As you know, this is a very active, ongoing investigation, and there are some restrictions on that, but we will do our best to respond.
Yes, we can handle classified information, and we fund your department, and so you need to provide that. We've found video that looks like somebody, a passerby, miraculously found this pipe bomb at the DNC and then notified the police. Miraculously, I say, because it was specifically the precise time to cause the maximum distraction from the events going on at the Capitol. Can you show this video that we have, please? I'd like to know if the director has seen this. This is somebody with a mask on, wearing a hat. They're walking in front of the DNC, which is out of the view on the right-hand side. You'll see him come into view. He goes to one police car. He goes to another police car. He's holding a backpack. He's got a mask on. He's talking to the police. And within a minute, they start scrambling. You'll see the camera turn. to the pipe bomb, the location of the pipe bomb. By the way, that's, I believe the Metro Police are now getting out of their car, and that's Vice President-elect's detail in the black SUV, I believe, parked about 30 feet from the pipe bomb, eating lunch. Okay, now we go over to the location of the pipe bomb. The cameras are scrambling. It appears to me that that's not a coincidence, that the person with the backpack who walked by that bench and then went up to the police and the detail didn't do that accidentally. They had a purpose in mind, and that what transpired after that was the result of information that person gave to them. If that person found the pipe bomb, would they be a suspect?
Well, again, I don't want to speculate about specific individuals. I will tell you that we have done thousands of interviews, reviewed something like 40,000 video files, of which this is one, assessed 500-something tips.
Have you interviewed that
the
person?
Devices. We have conducted all logical investigative steps and interviewed all logical individuals at this
Then
point.
you need, it's 900 days. You need to tell us what you found, because we're finding stuff you haven't released into the public.
For years, the media parroted the Democrat narrative about Russia collusion. And now, as we're learning week after week, that was a complete lie. The latest with the Durham report is that the Clinton campaign, the same group that fearmongered this Russian collusion, actually spied on the President of the United States. They spied on the President of the United States. They spied and they lied. We need accountability. We need accountability for the Clinton campaign. We need accountability for Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler, because they were complicit in this. So the media needs to start doing their job, talk about exactly what's coming out, and hold these people accountable. On top of that, the Attorney General, Garland, he needs to be out there making sure that Durham has all the resources he needs to do a thorough investigation.
About how it was Hillary Clinton's campaign and her allies who got the whole lie about Russia started to distract from her own email scandal.
There has been a lot of scrambling going on, and this push to get access to American citizens' data. Another corrupt agency, the Federal Trade Commission, they used Harry's commissioner report, in which Renee DiResta has her fingerprints all over it, asking for more access to people's data.
Ms. Khan, earlier, and I believe the gentleman from Arizona brought this up, you said people's privacy is paramount. I couldn't agree more. And as we talked earlier, I do think there's bipartisan support to deal with that, this sweeping up of data that happens, and scarier yet is FBI purchasing that data. So that is of paramount importance. But I would say the First Amendment's of paramount importance too. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
And then the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, asked you, what's disinformation? And you said you don't really have an opinion on that. Was that a fair assessment of your answer?
As part of our job at the FTC, we're focused on deception and fraud and that sort of thing.
Such a fraud.
Well, you wrote a couple years ago in a law review article, digital businesses such as Twitter disserve their users by facilitating the spread of disinformation. What were you talking about there then? What's disinformation?
I'm happy to take a closer look at the material you're mentioning, but as part of our work at the FTC, we've seen how fraud and scams can sometimes proliferate on these social media websites. We've launched an inquiry to try to understand, why are some of these crypto scams really proliferating on these sites, and what can we be doing?
These are the first two sentences in the introduction of the piece you wrote, again, just a couple years ago. Digital businesses such as Twitter disserve their users by facilitating the spread of disinformation. Who decides what's disinformation?
From the FTC's perspective, it's deception, deception and fraud.
That's fine. You can keep using synonyms, but I want to know who decides that it's deception, who decides that it's fraud, who decides that it's disinformation. In this case, you're talking about social media companies and what gets posted on their platform. Who decides what's disinformation, what isn't?
So, Congressman, again, at the FTC, we're focused on fraud and deception. There is a legal standard about what constitutes fraud. Again, this is about...
But you didn't say fraud or deception, you said disinformation. And my concern is, again, and it's probably the third time I've talked about this, but the sustained attack on Twitter when the ownership there changed and the platform was committed to not taking down speech, not taking down posts, allowing the sharing of information, and not censoring information. And we just had a major decision last week from a court in Louisiana, a federal court in Louisiana, where they said the government was in fact pressuring big tech companies to censor, and big tech companies were willing to go along with it. Now we have a change there, and you're going after the one company that's changed how they're doing things. That's what concerns me, particularly in light of the fact that you just wrote about this a few years ago, saying this is what goes on.
You just heard what Jim Jordan said. He said that third parties are buying this data and selling it to the FBI. It's crazy to me that this woman, who is the head of the FTC, is also being so shady and not giving a straight answer. They all know that they're in cahoots with one another. Again, as you can see here, this report is calling for access to information and doing assessments and audits around it and the need for doing that. Why? Listen to this next Congresswoman call Lina Khan's shady and dodgy history out.
Do you expect lawyers at the FTC to follow federal ethics rules?
Of course, everybody at the federal.
Do you expect lawyers at the FTC to be an active member in good standing of a bar of a U.S. state?
If they're practicing as a lawyer, they need to be in good standing with the relevant bar rules.
I understand that you were admitted to the New York bar on July 16, 2020, but in 2019 and 2020, according to your Senate questionnaire, you held yourself out as counsel for the Democrats on this very committee. You used this title, but you were not licensed to practice law. Counsel is a term reserved for lawyers, licensed lawyers. And in Wyoming, a person who in any manner holds themselves as competent to practice law without a license to do so is guilty of unauthorized practice of law. I believe the law in the District of Columbia where you held yourself out is similar. Do you believe it is appropriate for non-lawyers to claim the title of counsel?
Congressman, when I had the honor to work for this committee, I complied with all of the document requests that the HR folks requested, including documentation about the fact
when I checked your registration status this morning, I learned that you are not in good standing with the New York bar. Your license is listed as delinquent, which means you have failed to file your biennial registrations, and it means that you have not been paying your bar dues, completing your continuing legal education, and maintaining your law license. I believe it's shown on the screen. It also means you're subject to referral for disciplinary action. I find this situation to be stunning and a reflection on your ethics. With that, I yield back.
And this, my friends, is what DEI, diversity, equality, inclusion hiring looks like when it backfires on you. These same shady people want to have access to your data. It's truly unbelievable what is going on right now, and our media does not seem to want to talk about it. They're just looking the other way because they're equally guilty and in bed with this. For the people, we're not getting this information straightforward, and I think it's extremely concerning. I mean, we should not be caring about Meghan Markle going to the grocer's market, walking her dog in a no dogs allowed area. Look what this woman's agency did. They had Ernst & Young create a report that would be negative about Twitter and bullied them into doing it because they didn't want any trouble from the Biden administration. Now, this brings me to talk really quick about Nigel Farage. Now, if you don't know, this broadcaster, and also I think he's part of a political party in the UK, well, recently his bank closed his account, and I don't think they gave him a proper explanation as to why they chose to close his account and have him no longer as a customer. But the issue is that he can't get another bank account anywhere else in the UK. Now, for anyone who is living in society, you need your bank account for so many things, such as living and keeping your money safe, as well as like if you wanted to buy a house or get a job or, you know, anything that involves life. So essentially, they've made it really difficult for him to be in Britain. But also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this also affected the members of his family who did nothing wrong. Here in America, we still have some layer of rights in which the government cannot go in and spy on its citizens, as that is a breach of our Fourth Amendment. And the FBI was caught doing this to the people on January 5th and 6th.
Did the FBI ask financial institutions to turn over their customers' debit and credit card purchase history in the Washington, D.C. area for January 5th and 6th, 2021?
I don't know the answer to that as I sit here right now.
Well, we do, because Bank of America gave us this email from the FBI to Bank of America.
Well, I am aware that Bank of America provided information to the FBI, but what communications occurred between the FBI and Bank of America about it?
Let's read it. To recap our morning call, we are prepared to action the following threshold. Customers transacting debit card, credit card, Washington, D.C. purchases between 1/5/21, 1/6/21. That's scary enough. But then the next bullet point's even more scary. Any historical, capital letters, all capitals, any historical purchase of a firearm. You guys asked financial institutions, at least Bank of America, we think more. Did you guys ask him?
Again, I don't have the full sequence of the back and forth. You've got one, looks like you've got one email that I haven't seen before here. So I don't know that I have the full exchange that this
Well, does this email trouble you as much as it does members of the Judiciary Committee? That the FBI is asking for every single, I mean, we had members of Congress here that week, first time they're getting sworn in as a new member of Congress, their family in town, and you're sweeping, and they may happen to be a customer of Bank of America, and you're sweeping up every debit and credit card purchase of their family who were in town that week because their husband or their dad or their mom is getting sworn in as a new member of Congress? And then you're also saying, overlaying that information with, did this person buy a firearm?
And the question is?
I'm just nervous about that. Are you nervous about that?
As I think I've testified before, my understanding is that our engagement with Bank of America was fully lawful, but that we recalled the leads that were cut to field
Well, if it's lawful, that was my next point. If it's lawful, why did you say we're not going to use these leads? That's what Mr. Jensen testified to when we deposed him, the director of the terrorism unit at the FBI. That's what he testified to. Why did you not use the leads if it was lawful to get the information?
Well, there are
Chairman, it's 1 minute and 18 seconds over time.
There are plenty of times where there are things that we lawfully can do, but that we decide is better that we not do. And I think that's what happened.
The idea that Mr. Massey said earlier, the idea that this is lawful, that you can ask this is scary. This is something else we're going to have to change.
I agree. They need to start by putting these people in jail. And Harry and Meghan both need to go with them. And we really need to make a lot of noise about it because guess what? These folks are in the process of getting sued. Renee DiResta, Alex Stamos, two people that were a part of this Aspen Institute commission, they're getting sued. And I doubt that many people are aware of it. She is pretty much at the head of this censorship industrial complex. And in my opinion, I think she should be in jail. In my opinion, these folks have a lot of blood on their hands for playing gatekeeper of information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Twitter files were not just about Hunter Biden's laptop. Twitter files make it apparent Twitter worked overtime to suppress accurate COVID information. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a professor of medicine at Stanford who once tweeted an article he wrote about natural immunity. Thanks to Elon Musk's release of the Twitter files, we learned some of his tweets were tagged with the label of Trends Blacklist. Apparently, the views of a Stanford doctor are disinformation to you people. I, along with many Americans, have long-term effects from COVID. Not only was I a long hauler, but I have effects from the vaccine. It wasn't the first shot, but it was the second shot that I now developed asthma that has never gone away since I had the second shot. I have tremors in my left hand, and I have the occasional heart pain that no doctor can explain, and I've had a battery of tests. I find it extremely alarming Twitter's unfettered censorship spread into medical fields and affected millions of Americans by suppressing expert opinions from doctors and censoring those who disagree with the CDC. I have great regrets about getting the shot because of the health issues that I now have that I don't think are ever going to go away. And I know that I'm not the only American who has those kinds of concerns. Another example of what Twitter has done to censor folks is from Dr. Martin Koldorf, a Harvard-educated epidemiologist, who once tweeted, COVID vaccines are important for high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children. The Twitter files reveal this tweet was deemed false information because it ran contrary to the CDC. So my first question this morning of Ms. Gaddy, may I ask of you, where did you go to medical school?
I did not go to medical school.
I'm sorry?
I did not go to medical school.
That's what I thought. Why do you think you or anyone else at Twitter had the medical expertise to censor a doctor's expert opinion?
Our policies regarding COVID were designed to protect individuals. We were seeing...
You guys censored Harvard-educated doctors, Stanford-educated doctors, doctors that are educated in the best places in the world, and you silenced those voices. My next question is, did the U.S. government... Oh, excuse me, I have another chart I want to show you, Ms. Gaddy. I have another tweet by someone with a following of a full 18,000 followers. This person put a chart from the CDC on Twitter. It's the CDC's own data, so it's accurate by your standards. And you all labeled this as misleading. You're not a doctor, right, Ms. Gaddy?
No, I'm not.
Okay. What makes you think you or anyone else of Twitter have the medical expertise to censor actual, accurate CDC data?
I'm not familiar with these particular situations.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not. But this is what Twitter did. They labeled this as inaccurate. It is the government's own data. It's ridiculous that we're even having to have this conversation today. It's not just about the laptop. This is about medical advice that expert doctors were trying to give Americans because social media companies like Twitter were silencing their voices. I have another question, my last one for you, Ms. Gaddy. Did the U.S. government ever contact you or anyone at Twitter to pressure Twitter to moderate or censor certain tweets? Yes or no?
We have a program.
Did the U.S. government ever contact you or anyone at Twitter to censor or moderate certain tweets? Yes or no?
We receive legal demands to remove content from the platform from the U.S. government and governments all around the world. Those are published on a third-party website, and anyone can review
Thank God for Matt Taibbi. Thank God for Elon Musk for allowing to show us in the world that Twitter was basically a subsidiary of the FBI, censoring real medical voices with real expertise that put real Americans' lives in danger because they didn't have that information. I also want to thank one of my colleagues, Rokana, because as it turns out, censorship isn't just an important issue to conservatives. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, like Ro, found this censorship very concerning, and even wrote to you and to folks at Twitter that he was concerned about the First Amendment being censored. So I want to thank him for speaking up and speaking out about this issue because this should not be a partisan issue. This should be an issue that's an American issue.
You know, everybody's talking about reform, reform, reform. What really needs to be reformed is the media. Although we have freedom of the press, I think there should be regulations around pushing propaganda and lies. We know that that's never going to happen. So the next thing you have to do is just completely boycott it. Don't support it. Don't watch it. Don't subscribe to it. I actually started getting my news from these guys, and you know, for the most part, I find them genuine. But at the same time, you know, I have lost trust in the media, so I end up cross-checking. But there is a real problem with propaganda, at least in the United States. And it concerns me to see the government working against its people.
The other thing I would note is that there is a significant amount of, and a significant history of the CIA and other intelligence community organizations infiltrating the news media, placing stories in the news media. This happened all throughout Vietnam. We know it happened with both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, where millions of dollars was paid. This is all in the New York Times, by the way. This is not a controversial statement. The U.S. government and other governments spend millions of dollars paying for propaganda stories in other countries. One of the things that we've seen with the Twitter files, but also with the lawsuits by the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana, is that you start to see these propaganda operations that the U.S. government had run abroad turned inward against the American people.
And for those that want to understand what that would look like if CIA infiltrated in the United States and pushed propaganda, I think we all know or believe to some degree that it has happened and is happening, but we still have, for the time being, our rights. But clearly, as you're seeing what is being presented to you, people are trying to make a move to take those away. And for Guyana, that's exactly what had happened. For many years, the United States and the president of Guyana denied that the CIA was involved in overthrowing the election. Fast forward now to present time, the declassified files show that the CIA was very much involved in overthrowing the election because Kennedy was so afraid that Chetty Jagan was a communist, but that was so far from the truth. And instead, they backed a man who ended up becoming one of the worst dictators next to Hitler. Under the Burnham regime, so many Guyanese people had suffered from hunger to lack of opportunities, not advancing with education, human rights violations, a lot of murders, racial division. The irony about this is that Janet Jagan, Chetty's wife, was from Chicago and she went to Northwestern. She was a Marxist radical. So you kind of have to think, well, are they pumping out Marxists out of that university? Feels like it. Here's a fun fact for you. Technically, Janet Jagan, Chetty's wife, was the first female president of the Americas. She became president of Guyana in 1997. Anyhow, the political history of Guyana is quite fascinating, but let's get back to our story. The thing that we want to avoid here is what happened to that country to happen here. And while although we're still better off than, 90% of the world, I think that the American people have the right to know about Harry's visa. It goes much deeper than whether or not he lied on the application. This censorship industrial complex needs to go. Seriously, if they don't get him with his visa application, then they need to get him and include him with this cabal.
So the FBI used its relationship with Twitter to suppress criminal evidence being revealed about Joe Biden 1 month before the 2020 elections. You, ladies and gentlemen, interfered with the United States of America 2020 presidential election, knowingly and willingly. That's the bad news. It's going to get worse because this is the investigation part. Later comes the arrest part.
I think Harry and Meghan need to be investigated. That's just my opinion. But what do you guys think? I hope you enjoyed this series. I needed to lay this out because this stuff is important. When you look at everything that has happened over the course of 4 years and you connect all these articles, and stupid Meg doesn't realize that she just left a paper trail for all of us to follow. You start to see perhaps maybe there was an alternate agenda in coming here. And, when you look at Meghan's all of a sudden relationship with Gloria Steinem and calling people up to vote, and she was a former CIA operative and Renee DiResta was working for the CIA, you have to ask the questions. So, definitely let me know what you think. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe and I will talk to you later. Bye.
It was such a fraud.